My parents threw a huge celebration at my house, but told me I wasn't invited. They laughed and said, "You paid for it, but we're the ones enjoying it." So I waited until the party was in full swing, then shut off the power and called the cops. Their faces turned pale because they knew I wasn't bluffing. I never imagined it would come to this. I always knew my parents were self-centered, but I didn't realize the extent they'd go to achieve their desires. I suppose I should begin at the start. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. My parents were well known here, not exactly beloved, but respected. They were strict, traditional, and obsessed with outward appearances. Everything for them revolved around status, how people perceived us, what they thought of our family. They cared little for my happiness, as long as I made them look good. Growing up, nothing I did was ever sufficient. If I earned an A, they questioned why it wasn't an A+. If I made the team, they wondered why I wasn't captain. Compliments were scarce, but criticism was constant. I learned early on that my value to them was based on my utility. I performed chores, ran errands, and essentially acted as a miniature employee in their household. Love was conditional, measured by how well I followed instructions. I moved out as soon as I could. I attended college on scholarships and through part-time jobs, rarely calling home except for the occasional holiday. After graduation, I secured a good job in IT and saved every penny I could. My parents never offered any help, not even a word of encouragement, but I didn't expect them to. That's simply who they were. After a few years, I managed to purchase my own house. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. 3 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and a finished basement I planned to convert into a home office. I was proud of it, and for some reason, I thought my parents would be too. I invited them over to see it, hoping perhaps this time they'd display a little pride or happiness for me. They walked through the house, dissecting every detail. The paint color was too bland, the kitchen too small, and my furniture looked cheap. Not a single word of praise or acknowledgement that I had bought a house on my own at a young age. I swallowed my disappointment, telling myself I didn't need their approval, but it stung more than I cared to admit. A few months later, my mom called me unexpectedly. Her voice was unusually sweet, almost saccharine. She asked if they could use my house for a small gathering, claiming theirs was too cramped. She said they wanted to invite a few friends over, and it would be low-key and no trouble at all. I hesitated. Something about her request felt off. But she laid on the guilt thickly. She said it would mean so much to them that they never got to entertain, and that it would be a chance to showcase how well I was doing. I caved, as I always did. I should have known better. The day of the small gathering, I went over to drop off the spare key, expecting to see my parents setting up a few chairs and perhaps putting out some snacks. But as I pulled up to my house, my jaw dropped. There were rental trucks outside, unloading tables, chairs, and even a dance floor. A catering crew was setting up in my kitchen, and I counted at least 50 people already milling around in my yard. This wasn't a small gathering, it was a full-blown party. I stormed inside, searching for my parents. I found my mom in the living room, arranging flower centerpieces as if she were hosting a gala. I demanded to know what was happening, and she just waved me off as if I were being dramatic. "Oh, don't be so uptight," she said. "It's just a little celebration." I felt my face flush with anger. "You said this was going to be a small gathering. This is a huge party." She rolled her eyes. "Stop overreacting. We needed a bigger space, and you have this whole house to yourself. It's not a big deal." Before I could argue, my dad walked in, laughing and clapping me on the back like we were old friends. "Look at this place," he said, grinning from ear to ear. "You did good, kid. You paid for it, but we're the ones who enjoy it." I was speechless. I looked at him, then back at my mom, who just smiled and went back to fussing over her decorations. I realized then that they didn't see me as their son. They saw me as a resource, a means to an end. They wanted to use my house to show off to their friends, to play the role of gracious hosts without spending a dime of their own money. I tried to calm down, telling myself it was just one day. Maybe I was overreacting. But as the afternoon wore on, my anger continued to build. People were everywhere, spilling drinks on my carpet, putting their feet on my coffee table and rummaging through my belongings as if they owned the place. I even caught a couple of kids jumping on my bed upstairs, their parents nowhere in sight. The worst part was watching my parents soak up all the praise. Their friends gushed about how beautiful their home was, how lovely the party was, and how generous they were to host such an event. My parents didn't correct them. They smiled and took all the credit, acting like they were royalty in my house. Then I overheard my mom talking to one of her friends, laughing about how they'd convinced me to let them use the house. "He's always been so gullible," she said. "A little guilt trip and he folds every time." My heart sank. It wasn't just that they were using me. It was that they enjoyed it. They enjoyed manipulating me, tricking me, and making me feel small. They didn't just want to use my house. They wanted to ensure I knew they could. I went to my room and closed the door, sitting in the dark while the party raged outside. I felt humiliated, angry, and hurt. I realized then that they'd been doing this my whole life, using me, taking advantage of my kindness, and then laughing behind my back. They never respected me. They never would. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I came out, the party was still going strong. I walked through my house, looking at the people who didn't care that they were trashing my place, at my parents, who were reveling in their stolen glory, and something inside me snapped. I realized I didn't have to tolerate it anymore. I didn't have to let them walk all over me just because they were my parents. I had power too. It was my house, my rules. And it was about time they learned that. I knew exactly what to do. I knew where the circuit breakers were, and I knew the number for the local police's non-emergency line. I was done playing the obedient son. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider in my own home, then they were about to discover what it felt like to be powerless, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. I walked down to the basement, my heart pounding, but my mind clear. I knew exactly where the main breaker was. I'd memorized every inch of this house when I moved in. Learned how everything worked. It was mine. I stood there for a moment, my fingers hovering over the switch, thinking about everything that led to this moment. All the manipulation, all the guilt trips, all the ways they made me feel small. They wanted to show off? Fine. I'd give them a show they'd never forget. I flipped the switch. The house went dark. The music cut off mid-beat, and all the lights blinked out. For a second, there was dead silence. Then the confusion hit. I heard people stumbling around, muttering in surprise. Someone shouted, "Who turned out the lights?" Another voice cursed as something crashed to the floor. I went back upstairs, moving slowly, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. I kept my face blank, playing dumb, blending into the chaos. My dad was in the middle of the living room, his phone out, the flashlight shaking as he tried to figure out what happened. My mom was near the kitchen, her hands fluttering uselessly as she whined about the ruined party. They were panicking. Good. I acted confused, asking if the power went out on the whole street. My dad snapped at me, frustrated and embarrassed, but I just shrugged. "Maybe it's a blackout," I said, trying not to smirk. "Could be the grid." He grumbled something under his breath and stomped toward the front door, probably to check if the neighbors still had power. My mom tried to salvage the mood, laughing nervously and telling the guests to just sit tight and that they'd get it fixed soon. But I could see the embarrassment on her face, the way she was shrinking under the judgmental looks from her friends. She was humiliated. For once, she wasn't in control. For once, they couldn't just snap their fingers and have everything go their way. I watched them squirm for a bit longer, then slipped into the hallway and pulled out my phone. I dialed the non-emergency line, keeping my voice low. I told the dispatcher that there was a massive party at my address, that it was loud and out of control, and that I was worried it was getting dangerous. I made sure to mention that I was the homeowner and that I wasn't comfortable with all those people there. Technically, it wasn't a lie. They said they'd send someone over to check it out. I thanked them, hung up, and slipped my phone back into my pocket, feeling a rush of satisfaction. They wanted to act like they owned the place? Let's see how they explained that to the cops. I went back to the living room just in time to hear my dad on the phone with the power company, yelling at some poor customer service rep who clearly had no idea what he was talking about. He was red-faced, pacing back and forth, his free hand waving around in frustration. I could almost see the veins popping in his neck. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. I didn't have to wait long. About 20 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The party guests froze, whispering in shock as 2 police officers knocked on the door. My mom's face went white. My dad dropped his phone, his eyes wide with panic. He opened the door, trying to play it cool, but I could hear the nervous tremor in his voice. "Good evening, officers. Is there a problem?" The first cop looked around at the crowded living room and then at my dad, his face neutral. "We got a noise complaint. Neighbors said the party was getting out of hand. Who's the homeowner?" "Here?" My dad hesitated. I could see his brain working, trying to figure out how to spin this, but there was no way out. He didn't live here. He had no proof this was his house. Finally, he stammered, my son. It's his house. But he said we could." The second officer's eyes landed on me. "You the homeowner?" I stepped forward, keeping my face calm, my voice steady. "Yes, sir. This is my house." The first cop nodded, looking back at my dad. "So you don't live here?" My dad's face turned red. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew he couldn't lie to a cop. "No, but he's my son. We were just having a small get-together." The cop looked pointedly at the crowded room, at the catering staff still standing around in confusion, and the rented tables and chairs packed with people. "Doesn't look very small to me." My mom rushed over, trying to charm her way out of it, her voice sickly sweet. "Oh, officer, we were just celebrating our anniversary. We didn't mean to cause any trouble." She looked at me, her eyes pleading, silently begging me to play along. I didn't say a word. The officers exchanged glances. The first one turned to me again. "Do you want all these people here?" I looked around at the faces staring back at me. Strangers who were treating my home like a banquet hall. People who didn't care that they were wrecking my place, my parents standing there expecting me to clean up their mess again. I shook my head. "No, sir. I never agreed to this." My mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. My dad's mouth fell, open, his eyes wide with shock. They were speechless for once, completely powerless. The officer nodded, his voice firm. "All right, folks, party's over. You're all going to have to leave." The room erupted in protests, people complaining about the ruined evening, demanding explanations. My parents tried to argue, insisting that I'd changed my mind and that I was just being dramatic, but the cops weren't having it. One by one, the guests filed out, grumbling and shooting dirty looks at my parents. The catering crew packed up, muttering under their breath as they carried out trays of uneaten food. The DJ looked annoyed as he dragged his equipment back to his van, the silent dance floor mocking my parents' failed attempt at playing host. My parents stood there watching their perfect party crumble, humiliated in front of all their friends. They kept looking at me, waiting for me to step in and fix it, to smooth things over like I always did. But I just watched, my arms crossed, my face blank. They wanted to use me? Fine, but they'd never use me again. And as the last car pulled away, leaving them standing in the dark, I knew this was only the beginning. As the last of the guests drove away, the red and blue lights still flashing against the walls, my parents stood there in stunned silence. My mom's face was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. My dad looked like he'd been punched in the gut, his shoulders sagging as he stared at me, disbelief written all over his face. For a moment, no one spoke. The house was dark and cold, the echoes of laughter and music now replaced with the hum of the police radios outside. It was eerie, almost surreal. My beautiful home, the one I'd worked so hard for, looked trashed. Empty cups on every surface, food ground into the carpet, muddy footprints across the floor. My mom was the first to break the silence, her voice shaking. "How could you do this to us?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw her for who she was. Manipulative, selfish, and completely unrepentant. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. "How could I do this?" I repeated, my voice cold. "This is my house. You lied to me. You used me. You humiliated me." My dad's face twisted in anger. "After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us? We raised you, gave you everything, and you treat us like this?" I felt something snap inside me. Years of resentment, of anger, of hurt, all bubbling to the surface. I'd heard that line my whole life. How I owed them. How I was obligated to do whatever they wanted because they'd raised me. But they never gave me love. They never gave me respect. Just demands and guilt trips. I took a deep breath, my voice steady. You didn't do this for me. You did it for yourselves. You wanted to show off? You wanted to take credit for my hard work. You wanted to make yourselves look good at my expense. Well, I'm done being your puppet. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of guilt or apology. They were tears of anger, of not getting her way. You embarrassed us in front of all our friends. Do you know how this makes us look? I almost laughed. Of course, that's all she cared about, her image, her reputation. Not about me or how she hurt me, just about her precious social standing. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. You should have thought about that before you lied to me. My dad's face turned red, his fists clenching. You ungrateful little... A knock at the door cut him off. We all turned, my parents exchanging confused glances. The cops had already left, so who could it be? My dad yanked open the door, ready to tell off whoever dared interrupt his tantrum. But his face went pale when he saw who was standing there. My aunt, his sister, the one who never got along with him, who'd been estranged from the family for years after some bitter fight they never explained. She looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp, taking in the scene in an instant. The trashed house, my parents' stunned faces, my arms crossed as I watched them squirm. Well, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Looks like I missed quite the party. My mom's voice went shrill. What are you doing here? My aunt's eyes flicked to me, her lips curving into a slight smile. I got a call from the cops. Said my nephew needed help clearing out some unwanted guests from his property. Thought I'd come by and see how he's doing. I felt a rush of gratitude. I hadn't called her. I didn't even have her number. But she must have heard my name over the police scanner and come to see if I was okay. She was always like that, swooping in when you least expected it, but when you needed it most. My dad's face turned red again, but this time with embarrassment. He hated his sister, said she was a meddling busybody who never knew her place. But, right now, he looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock. This is none of your business, he snapped, his voice shaking. Go home. My aunt's eyes narrowed. It became my business the moment you dragged my nephew into your mess. Do you have any idea how humiliated he must be? You used him, lied to him, and then tried to make him look like the bad guy. You should be ashamed. My mom's face went white. We didn't. We were just... My aunt shook her head, disgust clear on her face. Save it. I know exactly what you were doing. It's the same crap you pulled on me when we were kids. Always taking, never giving. Always making everything about you. She looked at me, her eyes softening. You don't owe them anything. Not your house, not your respect. Nothing. If they don't treat you right, they don't deserve you. I swallowed. Hard. My throat tight. No one had ever stood up for me like that before. No one had ever told me I was allowed to say no to them. My dad looked like he was going to explode. Get out! Get out of my son's house! My aunt raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. His house? Last I checked, he bought this place with his own money. You don't have any say here. In fact, from what I see, you're trespassing. My parents' faces went pale, identical looks of shock and horror. My mom looked at me, her voice trembling. You wouldn't kick us out, would you? I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in my life, I saw her as she was, manipulative, selfish, and toxic. I remembered all the times she'd used guilt to get her way, all the times she'd made me feel small and unworthy, and I made my decision. But before I could say a word, there was another knock at the door. We all froze. My dad opened it, his shoulders stiff, ready to yell at whoever it was. But he stopped cold, his jaw dropping. Standing on the porch were 3 more people, my parents' closest friends, the ones they'd been trying so hard to impress. Their faces were furious, their eyes blazing with anger. One of them stepped forward, pointing a finger at my dad's chest. We need to talk right now. And that's when I realized my parents weren't just humiliated. They were about to lose everything they cared about: status, reputation, and the fake friendships they'd built on lies. This was just the beginning. The room went silent, the tension so thick you could almost feel it. My parents stood frozen, faces pale, as their so-called friends marched into the house without waiting for an invitation. They didn't look around at the mess or the darkened rooms. They were focused, angry, and not here to play games. The one who spoke first was Mr. Harris, a man my dad had been trying to impress for years. He was a big shot in town, owned several businesses, and my dad was always sucking up to him, hoping to get in on some investment deals. Right now, though, Mr. Harris looked like he wanted to punch my dad in the face. "We need to talk about the money," Mr. Harris growled, his eyes blazing. "Right now." My dad's face went white. He glanced nervously at my mom, who looked just as confused. What money?" he stammered. Mr. Harris's jaw tightened. "Don't play dumb. You took thousands from me, said you were investing in that property. Deal. But it was all a lie, wasn't it?" My heart skipped a beat. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the look on my dad's face told me it was true. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find the words. I was going to pay you back," my dad finally stuttered. "I just needed more time." Another man stepped forward. Mr. Collins, one of my dad's drinking buddies. His face was red with anger. "You said the same thing to me. You told me you needed a loan to fix up your house, but you spent it on this party, didn't you?" He looked around at the rented chairs, the catering, trays, the empty champagne glasses. "You threw this whole thing on my dime." I looked at my parents, feeling my stomach turn. They didn't just use me. They used everyone. They took money, lied to their friends, and threw this huge party to show off, all while pretending to be wealthy and generous. It was all fake. My mom tried to jump in, her voice shaking. "It was all a misunderstanding. We were going to pay you back once the deal went through." But Mr. Harris cut her off, his voice cold. "There is no deal. I checked. The property doesn't even exist. You made it all up to get our money." My dad's shoulders slumped, his face crumbling. He didn't even try to deny it. He knew he was caught. My mom's eyes went wide, her mouth dropping open. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, realizing just how deep the lies went. Mr. Harris turned to me, his expression softening. "Did you know about this?" I shook my head, my voice steady. "No, I didn't know anything. They lied to me, too. They said they wanted to have a small gathering. I never agreed to this party." The others looked at me, nodding slowly. I could see the pity in their eyes, but also respect. They realized I was just another victim of my parents' schemes. My aunt stepped forward, her voice strong. "This is his house. They used him just like they used you. But enough is enough. It's time for them to face the consequences." Mr. Harris crossed his arms, his eyes cold as ice. "I'm pressing charges. Fraud, theft, whatever I can. They're not getting away with this." My mom burst into tears, grabbing my dad's arm. "You promised. You said it was all taken care of. You said no one would find out." My dad looked at her, defeated. I didn't think they'd check. I almost laughed at the stupidity of it. He really thought he could keep all these lies straight, that he could scam his way through life without ever getting caught. But the truth always comes out one way or another. Mr. Collins shook his head, disgust clear on his face. "You humiliated us, made us look like fools. I trusted you, and you took advantage of that trust. You're done in this town. Nobody will ever do business with you again." I watched as my parents' faces fell, the full weight of their actions crashing down on them. They didn't just lose their money. They lost their status, their reputation, everything they'd built their lives around. All because of their own greed and lies. My aunt put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. "You don't owe them anything," she whispered. "They did this to themselves." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. She was right. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel obligated to clean up their mess. They made this bed, and now they had to lie in it. The police came back a short while later. Mr. Harris and Mr. Collins filed their reports, showing the texts and emails where my dad had promised them fake investment returns. It was all the proof they needed. My parents tried to talk their way out of it, but the cops weren't buying it. They were let out in handcuffs, faces pale and eyes hollow. As they passed me, my mom turned, her face crumpling. "Please, help us! We're your parents!" I looked at her, my voice cold. "You never cared about me. You only cared about using me. I'm done being your pawn." Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. She knew it was true. They both did. I watched as they were loaded into the back of the squad car, their perfect image shattered. All their lies, all their manipulation, everything they'd built came crumbling down in one night, and they had no one to blame but themselves. As the cars drove away, my aunt stood next to me, her arm around my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said softly. I looked at my house, my home, finally free of their toxic presence. It was messy, sure, but it was mine. I'd earned it, and now I was finally free. Justice had been served, not just by the law, but by truth. Their lies had caught up with them, and there was no escaping the consequences. I didn't need revenge. Watching them destroy themselves was more than enough. I turned to my aunt, smiling for the first time that night. "Yeah," I said. "I did." And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace,